Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. You can see a lot of different kind of knives on the table today, but we're only going to be talking about one of those knives. The rest of them are going to play a supporting role in an incredible story. A story that involves a lot of perseverance. A story that talks about quality. A story that talks about craftsmanship, and a story that talks about soul. And that's the soul of that one knife we're going to talk about. If you'd like to hear more about that, go ahead and check out the video.
Sawyer, go feed the monkeys! Go feed the monkeys! Go over there! Go over there and they'll stand on you. Go over!
No! He's so happy.
All right, welcome back to the Fortified Castle. Hi to all my viewers. Bonjour, privet, guten tag, hola, ciao, konnichiwa, and good day, mate, to my foreign viewers. Today, we're going to be talking about a really cool, fascinating knife. This is it right here. This little knife is absolutely amazing. And the quality of this knife, the craftsmanship of this knife is just phenomenal. And this knife would date at least 180 years, but I believe more like 210, 220. I believe the date on this knife is, I think this knife dates back to the 1700s. We'll talk a little bit about that. And it's a friction folder. So it has a little tab on the blade right there. You open it that way and you can hold the knife blade open. So as you can see, this is a double-bladed Barlow, and you can see the Barlow is a little smaller than this blade. And this is my medium model 18 case, and you can see they're the same size. So the knife is not as small as it appears to be. If you look at it in contrast with the really small knife, this little fruit knife, you can see it's quite a bit larger. So it's not quite as frail as you might think. Measures 3 5/8 inches long. And so that's the knife we're going to talk about. But I want to talk a little bit about where we've come and how that knife got to where it is today. All right, so this is one of my newest knives. I've already showed it in a video. Absolutely remarkable knife, and it is beautiful. Very high quality knife. This knife is just absolutely remarkable engineering of this knife. We love knives like this, but when you look at this knife, it looks exactly like that, doesn't it? It looks engineered. There's a distinct sense of the modern when you look at this knife. It kind of lacks soul, so it's beautiful, but it doesn't really reach out and grab you. And I'll show you what I mean. This is a I-brand Carl Schleifer knife made in Germany in the 60s, maybe early 70s. But you can see it's a very high quality knife. It is. And this knife, though, doesn't have quite the same look. It's a little more used, but even just looking at it, it just has a little bit more something that grabs you, that makes you want to pick it up. If you go back a little bit further to this knife right here, this is pre-1940 Robertson. You get even more of a sense of that. The bone is worn and weathered, but it's still magnificent, high quality knife. And it just reaches out. It's almost like it conveys a story to you. It's almost like it wants you to hold it. And that's what I'm talking about, the soul of the knife. That's what's missing in these knives right here is the soul. This knife right here, it goes back even further. It's 1910 to 1920s, and one of the best knives I've ever seen. Very high grade mother of pearl in this knife. You can see there's a high polish on this knife. That was not put on by me or anybody else. This is a factory polish on this knife. And the amazing thing about that is no matter where you look on this knife, every piece of metal on this knife is polished to a high degree. Look at the top square right there on the tang, mirror polish, even on the inside. So this is a lobster design. If you look on the inside here, look at the mirror polish. See it on those springs everywhere you look, and the edges have milling on them, the liners have milling on them. Just an incredible piece of quality that went into this knife, and somebody did that. So a cutler did that. It's like he put a piece of his soul into this knife when he manufactured it. As you go back further, it gets even better. When you look at this knife, dates to the 1840s, it's even more craftsmanship put into these knives. All hand carved. There's penwork on this knife, little silver pins that are throughout this knife. Pins that were placed in the mother of pearl, which is extremely fragile, and the carving that went onto this knife. And this is some cutler putting his heart and soul into this piece of work right here. This is all hand filed at this time in cutlery history. This is not milled. And it's just remarkable work. This one, not quite as fancy. You have got ebony. This one is older than the one I just showed you. You can still see the hand filed work on this right here. Just really elegant work on these knives. This one around 1860, ivory, braided inlaid silver right there. Just amazing work. And a cutler did that. These are done by hand, where this is predominantly done by machine. And I wanted to show you that type of quality that was present in the 1840s before we talk about that knife right there. The truth is, most knives in the 1800s were more like this. Plain, single-bladed jacks, wood scales on them. Here's a 1820 penknife. Beautiful little rosewood scales on this. This knife was hand, you can see the saw marks on it. Not highly finished, but this would have been a knife that your average person might have been able to afford. They certainly couldn't afford something like this right here. So these knives, we kind of get the sense, we see a lot of them, that a lot of them were floating around, and the truth is they weren't. Most knives were more like this knife and more like this knife right here. That's your average knife that people carried around early in the 18th century and in the 17th century. This knife here, another example of an old jack from the 1840s, and it has stag handles. So this is a little more expensive example, but your average guy would have carried one that wasn't stag. It would have been bone or wood, and he would have used that knife for everything. And that's pretty much the way it was. So this knife right here, built at a later date in the 1700s, I believe the late 1700s, has aspects of this quality. And this knife was obviously made for somebody who had means, who was well off. And look at the little easy open notches there on both sides. Um, it's not the same quality as these knives. Cutlery had come a long way by this point. This was still pretty good craftsmanship on this knife, and I'm going to show you why here in just a second. Why the craftsmanship is so remarkable in this knife. So it is a friction folder. So it has a little tab on the tang so that you could open the knife, you put your finger on it, and then you'd be able to use the knife. And look at the work on that tab right there. See the delicate curves in the tucks in that thing? Just really remarkable. All right, I'm going to tell you why this knife is so special right now. So the pin work in this knife is what makes it so special. How many pins do you think are in this knife if you just look at it? 100, 200 pins, something like that, right? The truth is, there's an amazing amount of pins in this knife. I got to wondering that, and so I grabbed my jeweler's glass and I counted these pins up. There are 500 of these little tiny pins on each side of this knife. So 500 there, 500 there, laid out in a design. And they center around a groups. Come on. They center around, come on, pop in. There you go. They center around these groups of inlays. So this is an inlay of mother of pearl. And on the mark side of this, you have 6 mother of pearl inlays. You have 8 brass inlays, 4 on each side, and then 3 copper inlays surrounded by these little tiny pins. Each one of these diamonds have 45 to 50 pins in them. And then these inlays have about 13 around them, and then some offset that go out here in the sides. At the top here, it is bordered by these pins. Most of these pins are still in this knife. You see them across there. And so on the mark side, you have 6 mother of pearl inlays, 8 brass pins, and 3 copper pins in it. On this side, you have the pile side, you have 7 mother of pearl pins, and 8 large brass pins again, and 2 copper pins laid into that. This center one has a mother of pearl inlay into it. So not exactly consistent on each side, and it carries out the individuality of this knife. The design here is also different on each side, slightly different. You can see that. So this is somebody just crafting as they go. I don't think there was any grand plan other to have these groups surrounded by pins here on this knife. I want to zoom in on this. Look at those little tiny pins. So this is horn. The scale material on this is horn. These pins could not just be inserted into the horn. Horn is pretty hard, and bone in general is hard. So if this had been wood, they might have been able to press these pins in, but in horn, they had to drill a hole before they put these pins in. So for every one of these little pins, a little hole was drilled so that they could put the pins into. You see the brass pins right there. And then you can see the mother of pearl reflecting. The mother of pearl insets. That one's broke. Just absolutely remarkable. You have Rosetta style tail pin there, or I'm sorry, head pin, holding the knife together. And then look at the work on the bolster, how it's cut in. And the reason it's cut in on that bolster is so that you can put your finger on this and pull out the saw blade. So these are not nickel silver, and they're not silver. They're nickel. So you have nickel plating over regular carbon steel on these. Get back out here. I was getting dizzy looking at that. Come on, snap in. So the pinwork doesn't stop on the knife itself. You can see on the blade here, there's 7 pins right here on the blade. 3, 5, 7, and 2 more right there. So a total of 9 pins there on the blade. And then the saw blade had 2 pins. They're missing now. There were 2 brass pins there on the saw blade. Look at how the stamping on this, how imperfect that stamping is. So it's done by hand out of forging by a chisel. And look at the secondary one right there. There's another line there. Very imperfectly done. And the maker's mark, Amal, Al. Amal means hope. Not sure whether that's purposeful or not. Probably just the name of the maker on this knife. And you have it on multiple areas on the blades. What's interesting is it's upside down on that blade. On this blade, it's right side up. So this is a time when there's not a lot of consistency in cutlery. By the late 1800s, these names, which traditionally French marked their blades, not the tangs. And by the late 1800s, you can see here on this French knife, the Pradal is just very standardized. And this is typical of what you would see along with maker marks on these blades in the late 1800s leading up to the 20th century. So this is absolutely remarkable craftsmanship for the age of this knife. And I hope you guys really enjoyed that. Look at how, I want to show you this tang again. If it's constructed in a very specific and purposeful way. So that tab, remember I showed you those little flares before, have a purpose. And this blade sits perfectly, look at that, perfectly into those tabs to keep it from going up when you're sawing. So on the main blade, the tab comes down and holds the blade from going up, and you put your finger on it. But when the secondary blades are used, then the tang is used to keep these blades from going up. Dual purpose. Isn't that amazing? What a fantastic piece of history this is. And just remarkable penwork. Not the finest. It's not as good as this right here. This is much better penwork. But this came at a much earlier time. All right, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Appreciate you for dropping by and taking a look.